So what we're going to look at now is looking at functions and determining the intervals where the function is increasing, decreasing, or constant. All right, now we say a function is decreasing. Notice what's going to happen. I'm going to do the best I can with this paper clip. So as I go, and remember you always read a graph from which way? Left to right. As I go from left to right, I want you to notice the y values. You got to look at the y values. As I go from left to right, what's happening to these y values as I go from left to right? The y values are getting smaller, right? And then all of a sudden there's this little valley right here, and then all of a sudden your y values are getting what? Larger. So we say that my y values are decreasing. Then all of a sudden they're what? Increasing. Then all of a sudden they're what? Decreasing. Okay? In this particular function, was my function constant at any time? No. All right, now we're going to come back to this. Let's look at the other one. Now also notice that there are arrows here. There are no arrows here. As I go from left to right, along the x-axis, what's happening to my y values? Decreasing. All of a sudden they're what? Constant. My y value is the same. In this case, it's always going to be a 1 right here, right? Y values are 1. They're constant. All of a sudden it's what? Increasing. Okay? So you have the idea what I mean by the function increasing, decreasing, or constant. That idea is pretty simple for students. Now, here's what you got to do. It says determine the intervals. The intervals. These intervals is your domain. The interval is your domain. So you got to list your domain. Okay, you got to list your domain. So when we talk about the intervals, that's going to be your domain. All right, now, here's what I would do. The best you can, I know you don't like doing this, you think it's a little kid, but you may want to color your x-axis. So tell me, when I go from left to right, what are my y values doing right here? Decreasing. All of a sudden they're what? Increasing. Where does it start to increase? At what x value? Negative 1. So from here to here, what are my y values doing? Decreasing. Okay? Decreasing. From negative 1 to what? 1, what are my y values doing? Increasing. All right, so look at the paper clip again as we go through this. As I go from left to right, my y values are doing what? Decreasing. So notice the brown color. Then all of a sudden, right here at that little plateau, that little valley, it changes. Right? It goes from decreasing to what? Increasing. But where does it change? At negative 1. That's going to be important in a little while. And then it increases, right? So that's that orange color. And then all of a sudden, at what x value does it change? At 1. And then from 1 to infinity, what are my y values doing? Decreasing. So from 1 to here, it's decreasing. Okay? Now, let me go back to the brown color and put an arrow here. And I'll explain why I put an arrow here. You remember a while ago, yesterday we talked about the domain of this function. What's the domain of this function? Negative infinity to infinity. So you'll see the arrow here going from negative infinity to what? Infinity. Okay, so that's why we have that arrow on both sides, because the domain, you had that yesterday, the domain is negative infinity, infinity. But in the domain, there are three separate intervals. So see those three different intervals? I have them colored. This interval, what's happening to my y values? Decreasing. This interval, the orange interval, what's happening to my y values? Increasing. And this interval, the purple one, what's happening to my y values? They're decreasing. Okay? So here's how you write it. Now, when you talk about increasing, decreasing, or constant, you're always going to use open intervals. So it's going to be parentheses that you're going to use. Okay? So you can use parentheses always. All right? So when we talk about increasing, decreasing, and constant, you're going to use open intervals. Okay, and then all you do is just read what you have. Notice the coloring helps you. Some of you have little kids. You may want to borrow their coloring box. So you're going to say increasing, and then the interval. So let's see, it's increasing in how many places? How many intervals? One. It's going from where? -1, comma, all the way to what? 1. Notice the parentheses. Use parentheses. You must use parentheses. When you talk about increasing, decreasing, or constant, those are open intervals. Open intervals. So use parentheses. All right, and then decreasing, how many intervals are there? There are 2. So you're going to write it like this. You're going to now notice the arrow, right? So you're going to say from where? Very good. Negative infinity to -1. Union, and then from where? 1 to infinity. All right, so that's number 1. It is straightforward. If you use those colors, all of you should get this. All right, now again, remember the arrows on both sides. The arrows on both sides because the domain of this function is negative infinity to infinity. If you look at number 2, what's the domain of this function right here? -5 to 3. So there aren't going to be any arrows. No arrows. When I do this, there are no arrows. Because you didn't hear me use the word infinity or negative infinity at all, right? Okay. Now, always your graph from left to right. So as I go from left to right, what are my y values doing here? Decreasing. All of a sudden they're what? Constant. All of a sudden they're what? Increasing. Okay, so let's use our colors. Very simple if you use your colors. Am I going to use arrows at all? No, because the domain is not negative infinity and it's not infinity. So from -5 to what? -2. What are my y values doing? Decreasing. Change the color, from -2 to what? 1. What are my y values doing? They're constant. In fact, you can see that my y value is always going to be a what right here? A 1. And then from 1 to what? 3. What are your y values doing? Increasing. And then all you do now is just answer the question. No, remember, when you talk about increasing, decreasing, or constant, now he had a good question. He says with the dots you have to use brackets. That's true if I asked you to tell me what the domain was. So if I said, what's the domain of this function, let's kind of remind you about yesterday. The domain of this function is what? -5. Bracket -5 to what? 3 bracket. But when you talk about the intervals where it's increasing, decreasing, or constant, those are open intervals. So you must use parentheses. Okay, always use parentheses. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about increasing first. Where's it increasing? Parentheses 1 to what? 3 parentheses. You're done with that. Where's it decreasing? -5, -2, parentheses. Where's it constant? -2 to 1. All right, so that's number 2. All right. Invest in, y'all, you need maybe 5 colors. Just go to dollar store, get a dollar box. All right. Now, before we do the increase and decrease in constant, what's the domain of this function right here? The domain.
-5 to infinity.
Very good. -5 to infinity. Bracket -5 to infinity. So on one end, I will have an arrow, right? When I draw the colors help you. I have a whole bag right here. All right. So from -5 to what? What are my y values doing? Decreasing. My y values are decreasing. You can see it. Your y values are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Then all of a sudden, from -2 to what? To 1. What are your y values doing? Constant. And then all of a sudden, from 1 to what? Infinity. Very good. With the arrow. Notice I put an arrow there. What are your y values doing? Increasing. All right, so decreasing, constant, increasing. All right, so where's it decreasing?
From -5 to -2.
Okay. Where's it constant?
-2 to 1.
Okay. And where's it increasing?
1 to infinity.
1 to infinity. Good. 1 to infinity. Straightforward with the colors help. Coloring that x-axis helps you with these. All right, so now I'm going to ask you the question again. What is the domain of number 4?
-infinity to infinity.
Yep. Domain of number 4 is -infinity to infinity. So when I color my x-axis, I'm going to have arrows on both ends. So what's happening at that first part of the graph?
Decreasing.
What's decreasing?
The y.
The y values. Your function, when you say your function is decreasing, that means your y values are decreasing. What do I need to draw, though? An arrow. So I'm going from -infinity to what? 2. And what's your y values doing? Decreasing. Then from 2 to what? 4. What are your y values doing? Increasing. And then from, just use a different color. So you don't have to be consistent with your coloring, but if you want to make your orange decreasing, then do that. 4 to what? 5. What is your function doing? Constant. All right. So that's constant here. And then I'm going to use orange because I use it for decreasing. So from 5 to what? Infinity. What are your y values doing?
Decreasing.
Decreasing. And so where's it increasing?
2 to 4.
2 to 4. Notice the parentheses. Where's it decreasing? How many intervals? 2 intervals though, right?
Right.
So you're going to say -infinity to what?
2.
2, union,
5 to infinity.
5 to infinity. And then where's it constant?
5.
4 to 5. Now, when we go back, let me go back to number 1 real quick. Because on the worksheet, there's going to be, it'll say increasing blank, decreasing blank, constant blank. So where was it constant? Nowhere. So you say nowhere. Make sure you put the word nowhere if it doesn't apply. Okay? All right, nowhere if it doesn't apply. All right. Number 5. What's the domain? Negative infinity to infinity. So the domain of number 5 is negative infinity to infinity. So when I shade in my x-axis, I'm going to have arrows on both ends. So I'm going to go from negative infinity to what? To 2. So from negative infinity to 2, what are my y values doing? Increasing. So they're increasing. And then from 2 to what? Infinity, what are your y values doing? Decreasing.
Constant.
That's right. You say nowhere. So increasing from where?
Negative infinity to
Okay. Decreasing where?
infinity.
Constant?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Okay. Use colors. Soon, you see how the graph looks here? It's not continuous. All the other graphs were continuous. In other words, there weren't any breaks in the graph at all. You're gonna learn how to graph something like this next week. It's very simple. It's not that difficult.
That's it.
All right. What is the domain of this, though?
Negative infinity to infinity.
Negative infinity to infinity. So when I shade my x-axis, I'm going to have arrows on both ends. So tell me, from negative infinity, the arrow here, from negative infinity to what? 3. What are your y values doing? Constant. Very good. Then all of a sudden, from 3 to what? I'm sorry, thank you, from negative 3. Negative 3 to what?
0.
0. What are your y values doing?
Decreasing.
Very good, decreasing. You can see it. Your y values are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's actually going, if I ask you, now listen carefully, if I ask you, what is this y value right here that I'm pointing to? 7. You can see it, right? 7. And then it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller all the way to what y value? 4. Okay? But it's decreasing, so it's going from 7 to 4, and then all of a sudden, my y values are doing what here? Increasing. In fact, it's going from 0 to what? Infinity. Oh, I forgot to, what did I forget to do? Draw the arrow. So it's increasing here. So where's it constant?
Negative infinity to negative 3.
Okay. Where's it decreasing?
From negative 3 to 0.
0. Where is it increasing?
0 to infinity.
0 to infinity. All right. Okay. All right. So I think that was it, right? Okay, so that was it. So any questions on that increasing, decreasing constant? It does help. It does help if you use colors. Okay, now